Hello, all. How you doing? We're gonna go to Russ, who's got something to say.
All right, so let's talk about the whole Ticketmaster Bruce Springsteen fiasco, and it is a
Oh,
fiasco. So Ticketmaster is trying to defend their position of dynamic pricing by saying, "Hey, these $4,500 seats, it's not like it's every seat." And it's like, yes, we understand that, Ticketmaster. What they're trying to say is only 1.3% of these seats sold for over 1,000.
dynamic pricing equals highway friggin' robbery.
And they say 11.2% of sales involved the dynamic pricing. Okay, so let's break this down. 53% sold for 200 or less. So what they're saying is if you live in Greensboro, North Carolina, yes, you were able to get a, mid-level seat for like $250. If you were in New Jersey, it was $4,500. If you were in New York, it was $4,500 for floor seats. This is what we're talking about. People were showing screenshots.
Is the show in North Carolina? Where is the show?
It's all over. He's doing a regular tour. But what I'm pointing out is they're trying to work the percentages by saying, hey, in West Virginia, if you go and see him, he's regular price. Yeah. So it's like, you know what? Both of them should be ashamed of themselves. I told you Springsteen was going down a bad road when he was doing the Broadway thing and the amount he was charging for that. He was supposed to be the everyman. Now
Broadway tickets were relatively reasonable.
Well, what's reasonable?
But this is what this is. This is variable pricing coming to your to rock and roll or any kind of music, because I mean, and what this is going to do, Russ, you're going to hit like, okay, this weekend the Yankees played in Baltimore. There was sellout crowds at Camden Yards. You know why? Because people drove down 3 hours from New York to Baltimore to buy the cheap tickets because they weren't going to go out and pay $1,000 to sit 2 rows off the field in front of a friggin' mesh at Yankee Stadium. So, I mean, honestly, these people, and I'm talking about most musicians now, I mean, I get it. Their copyright is gone. The only thing they can really do to make significant money is to sell their copyright, like David Crosby and Dylan did, and they're not getting the money that they used to, because of Spotify and YouTube. But really, this is just whoring themselves. It's really bad.
Well, they don't have to sign on for dynamic pricing. The band is in charge of how they want their tickets represented. Right. As an example, back in the day, Springsteen was one of the first that did wristbands. I remember when he was doing the River Tour in Houston and I was in college, they had to go out and guys were waiting for wristbands. They said, hey, we'll get you a ticket if you want. And I politely turned them down because I said the album was shit. But the idea was still that was a good way of doing it. You can't do it that way anymore. I get it. But you don't have to do dynamic pricing either.
No, I mean, I think this it's really surprising because like last time Springsteen came around, he actually was really inexpensive and compared to everybody else. And that's a big thing. Like, tickets, I mean, concert tickets are ridiculous. Yes. This is the only way artists make money, but a guy like Springsteen's made his money.
We all expect a level of ridiculousness, but like, as an example, if you're going to pay $700 and you're not even anywhere near the floor or have a great view, what is the point?
Yeah, I mean, Springsteen fans are crazy, I mean, I've got one living in the house with me here, so I can tell you that, like,
and to be fair for Springsteen, and fair to Springsteen for one sec, the ticket prices for Robert Plant and Alison Krauss in Canandaigua, I was interested in going to see because I never saw Led Zeppelin, and I love Robert Plant, even though I'm not the fan of the bluegrass stuff that he's doing with Alison Krauss. I wanted to go see it. And as soon as I saw the ticket prices of $900 for the first 10 rows, I'm done. No, can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, this is too much. I mean, it's just way too much. And I'm surprised I'm really surprised that Springsteen.
And Springsteen's not the only artist. It's just it's the one that really came into focus because people were legitimately shocked that he would do it. That's what.
Yeah, I think that's really where it comes down to more. And now, so the way it works, like so my wife wants to get tickets to this, right? And I have a connection in Philly, so I'll be able to do that. But she wants to go someplace else. She wants to see him twice, and I'm like, okay.
Right.
But
go to Greensboro, North Carolina. They're like the cheapest.
Well, yeah, like the cheapest to us would be like Baltimore, or
Right.
perhaps even like there's one in Penn State too. There's one out in Penn State. So like State College or Baltimore. So last week we got we did this thing through we entered this thing. So today we're getting and we won like the right to get in line for each of these concerts. Like so tomorrow morning at like 10 a.m. I've got to sit with like two computers, one for this one and one for this one, to see if I can get tickets to one of them.
So we're not doing an early show tomorrow.
No, it's like it's just then but we did she was excited. We got our codes to get into like the line for this. It is kind of great. I mean, he hasn't toured for 7 years. He's 72 years old. I mean, granted, the one thing I would give Springsteen versus a lot of the concerts I've seen recently is I mean, he does put on a very, very long
show. He'll play a long show.
I mean, you're going to get like, I saw a band recently that I was just like really looking forward to seeing, and it was ridiculous how quickly they played. And, I drove like an hour and a half away to see them. That always messes me up a little bit. Like I get very disappointed in that kind of thing when bands don't like at least, give like a good 2 hours into a show. Like, if you're the headliner.
In the chat room, like, hey, Springsteen's a legend. Expensive tickets should be. We understand expensive. When you start going over 1,000 and you go up to 4,500, that's beyond expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's very classic.
It's obscene, is what it is.
It's very much like so the top. I have friends who are like one of the doctors that my son goes to. She's a really big Springsteen fan. Her husband's a doctor, so both of them are doctors, and they tour around the world. They'll go see Springsteen anywhere in the world. They'll go like in different situations like that. Which is there's a lot of that goes on with a guy like him. So there's a lot of the people, and those kind of people will spend anything. They don't care. So it's like the money is it's for the common person that like which Springsteen is supposed to be. This is pretty absurd. And I think that the whole concept of it is of having these vast difference in prices. Like
I never thought I would harken back and look fondly at buying ticket prices the way that I used to when I was a kid in the 80s, which was to freeze my ass off while somebody in a van was handing out numbers to wait in line for 12 hours to buy Genesis tickets in -degree temperatures. I'd rather do that than go online and think you have a chance to get tickets for Paul McCartney or somebody else, and they vaporize in 5 seconds.
Genesis is dead, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, this is just where we are, right? So it's way more convenient, and they're just making more money. I mean, they're making more money. They are.
Thanks for the update there, Russ. Thank you.
It's I don't know. It's to me. I wouldn't do it if I had the success that Springsteen has had, the guy, for Springsteen fans, they're looking at this like, every tour could be his final tour. He's 72 years old.
And I think that's what hovers over everybody's head in this thing is the fact
exactly.
But there's always yet another tour.
There tends to be another tour.
But there might not be. He might drop dead tomorrow. I mean,
that's the thing, right?
I'll be the first to say my favorite band in the 90s, obviously growing in the 90s was Soundgarden. So,
right.
I always thought we were lucky enough to see Soundgarden when they came back at the Tower Theater, and it was really cool. And I was hoping to see them again, but obviously you just never know in life, and it's kind of it covers over everything. And and Cornell was relatively young.
Yeah. I can't remember the specific year, but I don't exactly remember. And we'll start the show after this. Chris Cornell was playing solo in Buffalo. Friend and I were wanting to go to the show, but it happened to be the same night that the friend was she was running for election for a local office, and obviously we couldn't go. And then a few months later, he dies, and obviously that's what's driving people. It's like, okay, especially with these performers in their 60s and 70s, you don't know when it's the last. Now, for my purposes, I don't care if Phil Collins, I was not going to spend that money to go see Genesis when I saw them 7 or 8 times in their prime, to go see them on a nostalgia tour when he couldn't even sing. So, right. but Springsteen can still do something. So I guess he's still really good. And I saw him, on Broadway. Tickets weren't that crazy on Broadway, Russ. They really weren't. They were like $250 a piece. I mean,
for everywhere or just
it was the same.
I mean, that's not ridiculous.
That's not.
But the where you get like the expensive tickets and all that stuff is obviously like the resales and all that stuff. That's going to be what it's going to be, right?
No, that's true. We're not even talking resale prices. Like the prices I gave, were all like first level.
It is interesting, and the other thing about Springsteen too, like that used to be the case, is like he would have one show in Philly that would sell out, and then 2 shows would be added, right? That kind of thing.
Right.
So now, I guess it's 72. Maybe he's not going to be adding a bunch of shows. Maybe he's just doing these shows.
Yeah.
But he plays for Kevin. What's an We're Kevin now, joined by Kevin. What's your expectation on a concert, like as far as ticket prices go? We're talking about the Springsteen thing.
It's really escalated amazingly. That I'm aware of the concert you were talking about with Springsteen. I would love to have seen that. The one thing about Springsteen that I think allows him to, it was always his lyrics were sometimes, when he sang them, unintelligible even in his prime. It was kind of mumbling. That's one thing, in Jersey they have Springsteen, in Detroit we have Seeger, and Seeger, just his lyrics and his words are, even in the 70s, are all really crystal clear. But that's, with Springsteen, it's his presence, it's his music, it's his melody, it's all that. So I don't know that it really matters that he kind of mumbles.
He gets all.
The mumbling doesn't matter.
No.
But it sounds pretty freaking amazing.
It sounds good. I've seen Springsteen several times, and I enjoyed all the concerts. But everything is $200 now.
No, but we were talking about it got up to $4,500, Kev, for floor seats.
Yeah, really? Selling, Springsteen's new thing is they're selling these like tiered seatings, and then so they're actual price.
Common now.
If mumbling was the case, Bob Dylan wouldn't have had anybody in his audience since the 70s. So
it was interesting. I saw a play on Broadway last time I was there that it was a take. It was sort of what was the one, Eklund, you'll know, the Billy Joel stuff that they turned into a musical. It really wasn't very good. Yeah. Where Mamma Mia ended up to be a terrific show, which they just turned ABBA's music in. They took Dylan's music and turned it into a play on Broadway. I wouldn't call it a musical because there was dialogue too, but
it was called Moving Out. It was called
Moving Out. That's the Billy Joel one. But anyway, we were. I was surprised because I was with my daughter and her husband, who is very, he's an actor, director, so he's on top of songs and so forth. And he just said, I don't think I know more than 2 or 3 Dylan songs. And I was aghast at that. And then I thought about it, and he really only has 2 or 3 like hits, like
Watchtowers one. Right?
Yeah. So
the funny thing was most of it, a great deal of his songs were more famous for other people doing them than himself doing.
Right. That's true.
Yeah. That's a great point, Mike. And he was more known, just like I think Springsteen has known as much for his presence. I mean, not that his songs weren't good because they were, but for his presence. I think the counterculture of Dylan was really what he was kind of known for.
Yeah,
so.
And it just the timing of his stuff at the time it came out too.
Right.
He was so linked to the history of the events of the day.
And prolific songwriting as well. I mean, that's really his song. I mean, he's just so far along the pantheon of so many artists who he's written music for.
And before Born in the USA, I mean, he had Rosalita, and he had the anthem of New Jersey, which I'm drawing a blank on.
Oh, Born to Run.
Born to Run. His 2 biggest hits were Because the Night by Patti Smith and Blinded by the Light by Manfred Mann. Those were the 2 biggest pop hits written by Springsteen before not Rick Springfield.
Springfield would be Jesse's Girl. That would be Jesse's Girl.
Yes.
Don't walk away. Okay, let's start the show. We've been talking about
all right, here we go. Ready? I could debate that, but all right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, July 25th, otherwise known as Christmas in July, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello, and I loved Bruce Springsteen when he was on General Hospital.
I'm Anthony Mingioni from Center Ice Philly Magazine.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology. I did see Green Day's American Idiot on Broadway. That was good. That ran for like 3 years.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday to fill you in comings and the goings in the hockey world. And we are back after a couple of days off last week because we had various different scheduling things, and it is summer, so there's a lot happening around in different spaces. But oh my gosh, here we go. We had a trade. We had a trade over the weekend. I drove down to to Margate on Friday night. Usually don't drive down at night. We usually go down Saturday morning, but we were like, we're awake. Let's go down. So get down there, stop into our local bar just to have a drink for a second. And then phones just go crazy as the Matthew Tkachuk trade goes down. And I will say this about him, about Billy Zito, and he has really made things interesting for us in the hockey world. This is a barn burner, Kevin. What were your thoughts on this when you saw it?
Well, Bill's at it again was my first thought, because really, this is just a mega trade. And my first thought was a cliche, and that is both sides got what they got, got what they wanted. And then I looked at the athletic grades and I laughed because the athletic grades, 6 different people, A's and above, meaning A pluses for Calgary, and B pluses. I think there was 1 B for the Florida on this deal. And I'd say that's relatively accurate. I'd give both sides maybe an A minus to Florida because they did give up a lot. But I think the one thing I'm bothered by this is what happens from here. Now, I don't know what's happened today. I've been driving. That's why I was a little late today. So I don't know whether the Flames have talked about what their intentions are.
The only thing that came out today that I saw was Huberdeau and Weegar both saying they were willing to sign long-term with.
Well, that's an important aspect of that because this is what I had the impression suddenly after that trade was made, just based on what I was hearing, that they intended to go into the season even if they didn't have Huberdeau signed. And I think that would be a big mistake. Yes. You have a chance here to hit a major home run if you trade him, if he's not going to sign. Because now you can trade him as a rental. You can trade him in a long-term deal. You've got a first-round pick already in the bag. You've got what people tell me is a B-plus prospect, a guy that's going to play in the league, hard to play against, might score 15 goals, be a third-line guy, but that's a lot of people like him. People like this guy. He's going to play. You've got that in the bag. Now, whatever you get out of Huberdeau, which I think would be considerable if you turned him around.
Yes.
You might get another first-round pick. You could demand a player that's going to help you now, and probably get at least another prospect out of the deal.
So the one thing, Kev, that did bother me was, and I thought, like you said, I couldn't decipher the trade and tell you who won it today. It's impossible. But what I could say is that I think Bill Zito has now set a new standard for risk-laden contracts because there really is no escape hatch on this contract. And if Tkachuk does have an injury 3 or 4 years into it, or he just slows down, or he's just not as physical, this is a franchise. Florida doesn't have a lot of money. They don't gain a lot of finances from their fans. And this is something where if they don't win in 3 or 4 years, and that deal could start to be an albatross. But I get it. He went for it now. I could see why Bill Armstrong didn't do this. He doesn't sign deals like that. And that's where we're at.
Well, this is where, and Kev, where I went was basically what you said was, okay, they got a return for a guy that they knew wasn't going to sign in Calgary. They got a good return for that. But you really didn't push things down the road because Weegar's a UFA at the end of this year and Huberdeau's a UFA at the end of this year. If you don't get them signed, this is a terrible deal. But, maybe they're more willing to sign than Tkachuk is because Tkachuk said, I'm not signing. So you did give yourself some wiggle room there. But I would hope that Brad Treliving had contacted Huberdeau's agent right after and Weegar's agent right after to find out, how open they are. And if they're not, then you've got 3 months until this beginning of the season to flip them and get somebody who does want to.
And they got a lot of, and the reports were that they have already received phone calls already about potentially flipping.
Yeah.
Specifically, Huberdeau is the one I've heard the most that they got the most calls on.
Yeah.
If I, was the owner of the Calgary Flames and Treliving said, I'm going to make this deal, and he started talking to me, I would say I could care less whether or not you've talked to them or not, because I would have made that deal knowing I could flip those players.
Right.
I mean, those players are both flippable,
Yeah.
and pretty quickly. Like there's, Now the only mistake would be if they don't flip them. I mean, unless they're going to sign. Now that's a different story. But I wouldn't go into the season. I might with Uyghur, but I wouldn't go into the season with Huberdeau without trading him.
I mean,
because you got to trade him.
Yeah, he is so valuable out there now, and because you've got both options, you can use the rental aspect of it and trade him to his cap hit's not that great. It's $6 million. He's very attractive to a team like Colorado, Tampa Bay, even to a team that is desperate to make the playoffs.
Islanders would take
that'll be a team like Tampa Bay. That would be an interesing risk, though, in that circumstance, to trade him and then see him go to the team.
No, I mean, and that's something Breezeball would do. Because this is, if you're trying to suddenly catch Colorado and you've lost depth, which they have, but your strength is now in your premium players, adding one more premium player makes sense. But with regard to Florida, I want to make this point. I don't think this contract is that risky because, and again, I think Bill Zito looked at this too. At the end of Huberdeau's contract, if he had signed him to an 8-year deal, he was going to be his late 30s.
Right.
Tkachuk is 24 years old.
Yeah.
A GM brought this up to me in a text. Just said that's what's lost on people. This is he said he'll get another big contract at the end of this.
You're getting a player of his caliber he's not even in his prime yet.
Yeah.
Right.
No, he said, and the difference would be, he said, what's the difference between a $6 million player and a $9 million player? He said, I look at this as a three. Like he said, you're paying $5 million for what I would consider average hockey players.
Absolutely.
We'll never know what other teams were offering in deals for Tkachuk. But if you look at it from the Tkachuk perspective, he's getting $9.5 million, which is Kucherov's deal in Florida. So he's getting a lot more of that money than he would if he played someplace else. St. Louis may have offered him that, but 9.5 in Missouri would be 9.5 would not be the same as 9.5 in Florida. Plus, if you look at the Blues and what the Blues probably offered, the deal probably wouldn't have even been close. It would have probably been.
I think St. Louis had far too much to do in terms of offload, in terms of
Kyrou, or
it's much like Philadelphia trying to move.
It was never the Tkachuk plan to go to St. Louis. That was pretty clear.
Yeah.
I mean, it was on his list. He was interested, but it was the same thing with Brady. There was never, even though because the Tkachuks are tight, we all thought, well, they're going to meet together in St. Louis. But that's not the way they view it. I mean, I bring up the story that Keith told me when I saw him in the middle of summer when Matthew was 19. I asked, hey, what's up with Matthew? Because I knew him from the development program. He goes, I wouldn't know. He said when the season's over, he moved to Toronto. He said he works out all summer there. He was living in Toronto. They're tight, but they're not tight. What I mean?
They're their own men. At the end of the day, each of them are their own men.
That's well put. They're their own men. They're Tkachuks and they tight, but they're their own people.
Let me ask everybody this question because I wonder, looking at Florida now with who has been subtracted and who they've added, whether now they're a better team than they were at the beginning of last year. And I look at that team.
We've discussed this on Off the Post yesterday. I'll bring it up again. I have some concerns about their blue line.
Yes.
Losing for everybody who is, especially Florida fans who are magnifying Uyghur's mistake in the playoffs. Yes. You are willfully forgetting the fact of how good a transitional defenseman he is.
Yeah,
he's Uyghur to
I
me.
think they were a little disappointed on him though as the season wore on. But go ahead.
But my whole thing, Kevin, is going to Calgary. I think it's a good structured system under Sutter. Sure. I think it can be utilized particularly well there and can continue to develop. I agree. I think there were certainly towards late in the season there were definite moments there, but but I'm looking at their defense construction wise. I'm kind of concerned with. There is a major. I think there's going to be even more unless they make another acquisition. I feel like there's a lot of reliance on Aaron Ekblad.
Yeah, your second pairing now is Gustav Forsling and Radko Gudas, which is
and that's and that's concerning to me.
But Kev, where I looked at was Weegar was the defense partner and the perfect complement to Ekblad, and Huberdeau was the perfect complement, 115 points to Barkov. Tkachuk can play with anybody, but I'm just wondering how that's going to affect that team overall when you lose those two players who are complements to your two best players.
You know what it actually reminds me of the Kevin, you go first. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you go.
The whole thing reminds me of a little bit of the Recchi for John Leclerc trade in Philadelphia. Like Recchi, if you remember, the Flyers were pretty bad, but Recchi had a monstrous season.
Yes.
And he was scoring he had more points than any other Flyer in history, like a crazy season. But the Flyers were struggling big time, and they couldn't, and then they turn around and they trade Recchi for Leclerc and Desjardins in a trade that turned out to be, probably one of the best trades in Flyers history, in terms of the fact that, that set them up for a decade of being competitive and, and everything like that. But they had to trade a player who just had 115 points, roughly around the same thing we're looking at with Huberdeau.
Yeah.
They weren't going anywhere with him. They weren't going anywhere with Recchi, I think the Florida kind of looked at it the same way, Kev. Like, they're not going anywhere with Huberdeau.
One other thing I would add is also, and this is another thing I brought up.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit of recency with this, but I also looking at the playoff numbers between Huberdeau and Tkachuk.
Yeah.
10 games for Huberdeau, 1 goal, 5 points. And I look at Tkachuk, 12 games, 4 goals, 10 points. And the way I whether or not it was, it was a difficult a more difficult than expected first round for Florida, and then Tampa cleaned their clock. And that's something that I have to look at with regards to whether or not they felt like they were at as far as they could go postseason wise with Jonathan Huberdeau.
Here's one thing I would say is that third pair of Brandon Montour and Mark Stahl is not great. So even if you can do something with that at the deadline, they're over $3 million over the cap still, which they're going to have to move somebody out. So they're going to be capped out.
They'll probably buy out Hornquist and the second buyout.
Right. But again, okay, fine. But again, they're going to be a cap problem team all year. I don't think they could ride that top four like a Chicago did back in the day or anybody else to kind of win a cup. So I am very worried about their defense.
But Kev, they're different, but are they better?
They are better. This is why. Look, Huberdeau, if you're talking skill, like, he's the best player. He's the skilled, offensively skilled. We've all watched him. He piled up the assists last year. You're absolutely right. He's great with Barkov. But who's the better player? I don't think there's any question. It's Tkachuk. And he's the better player because he can do a lot more for you.
Yes.
He's gritty. He's hard to play against. Like, you look up across from you to see him and you go, oh, my, here we go again. If you're trying to get in the zone on Huberdeau, you're not concerned about that. You're worried about his offensive ability. Huberdeau is older. The window for Florida is just opening because of Zito and bringing in Reinhart, bringing in Bennett. Lundell is coming aboard. That wasn't his pick, but, he's going to be coming aboard. Their core players are all in the prime of their career. This window will be open 4 or 5 years. Yeah. So why not take advantage of that with bringing in a guy who's a very unique player? There might only be 4 or 5 players in the whole league like Tkachuk. Right. He can score. I mean, he's already a 40-goal scorer. Yeah. He's hard to play against.
Yeah.
He is historically productive. I mean, it's only had a short period of time, but in big games, you notice him. He's always there. And I'm not sure that's all true. So I think they got the best player on the deal out of this, and I think they were willing to pay a little bit of a premium to do that. I also think Weegar was on their short list to deal with their cap problems. Mm-hmm. I agree with Russ that their defense needs work, but it's a lot easier to find competent, not exceptional, competent defensemen at the trade deadline than it is skilled, power, gritty forward.
Kevin, I have a question for you, a Tkachuk-related question for you.
Yeah.
When all said and done, when we get to the end of each of their careers, do you think Matt will be better than his father?
Oh, that's a great question. Keith was a really good player, a really good player. But I don't know. I mean, if we're going to measure it on playoff success, I think Matthew's going to be the better player. I think Matthew's going to win a cup. I think both of them had iron will, but Matthews seems to be able to have even a greater impact in games. I don't know. They're both pretty mean. So
I think Matthew's better all around. But
I'll go out on a limb, and I don't even think he's going to be the. I think Brady is.
No, I think Brady's the best one too.
Yeah, Brady could be for sure. I mean, Brady's a quality player as well. I did, by the way. I love the tweet about the people that were putting out. That was even the biggest news, and then they showed the proposal of Brady on.
Right.
Was that I didn't have the timing of that though. Was that the same night or? Was it the 2 weeks before? But
yeah, I don't know either.
I saw it on the same day where people were saying, the Tkachuk had a pretty big weekend. So
I think you also have to take into account that this is Florida, and they're selling tickets in Florida, and they have to sell tickets. And last year they weren't selling tickets during the regular season, no matter what they tried.
Over 9,000.
Yeah. I mean, even though they were the best team and they won the President's Trophy, they didn't sell tickets in the regular season. And then when the playoffs came, they were disappointing, and that definitely was not the way they planned it. I mean, you wanted a long playoff run there to get money for this team, and I think that when you look at who's going to sell more tickets, Tkachuk or Huberdeau, it's not even close. That's not Huberdeau is a really super skilled player, but very nondescript player. You can watch.
Do you really think there's going to be that much of an uptick? I don't know.
I think that Tkachuk's the kind of person that your average Florida man can get behind.
Well, I mean,
I think that it's really and I really mean that in the best possible way.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think it's going to make a daily difference, but I think if they win. Then yes, fans will show up. But if it doesn't equal winning,
they were winning last year, Russ, and they weren't showing up. That's the point. I mean,
I know
they were winning last year and they weren't showing up, and don't think that doesn't play into what they're doing down there. They've got to sell tickets.
Okay, they won the President's Trophy last year. It wasn't like a blip of a month. They were the best team in the regular season in the NHL, and they were still drawing 8,000 people on a Tuesday night in January.
Yeah, but regular season, Mike.
Yeah, I know.
You got to win. You got to win the playoffs. I mean, if you look at
winning the playoffs,
Nashville's the same way. When they got to the final, that cemented the Predators in the city. When Carolina, won the cup and the tailgating and all that. I mean, you got to have playoff success. Regular season doesn't do it.
All I know is that if you put that team last year in Buffalo, they'd have a 10,000 person waiting list like they did a decade ago.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to turn it into a northern market versus southern market thing again, Mike.
Yeah. Well, hey, I can go down that road because it happens all over again every time.
Yeah.
Yes, they have success. And if they have success, then there's a blip of a couple years when fans go to Carolina, and then it drops off. And and it's never gone up in Florida, even after the Rats were being thrown on the ice in '90. They were selling out games then, but not anymore. So I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, but so let's talk about all the first round draft picks that are gone now. So what does that mean, to them? I mean, that's so now they don't have a first round draft pick for 4 years.
I mean, Brian McCabe's not going to be very busy the next few years, Russ.
Well, he will. They'll make other trades. They'll add some other picks. But the thing is, this is where you say, like Kevin says, there's this 4 or 5 year chance they have to win. If they don't win in this 4 or 5 years without having these picks, they will be starting over again.
All I know is that 6 Atlantic Division coaches were ordering Excedrin because they have to face the Tkachuk brothers 8 times next year.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, and Russ can vouch for this, the window could be open 4 or 5 years, but the impact of no drafts will be felt 7 and 8 years down the road.
Yes.
So, that's maybe the fallacy of those of us who think, well, they're competing now. It's okay to do that.
Right.
And it didn't seem so bad last year when it looked like they were going to make a serious run. Now, when they didn't make a serious run and there's no Sherratt,
Giroux, you traded a first round for Giroux. Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you're going, well, what was that all about? So,
Yeah.
but anyway, I still like the move from both perspectives, and I think everybody got what they want. I do think they've got to have a real difficult conversation with themselves in Calgary about where they're really at.
Yeah.
Do they really think they can win?
Yeah.
And I think that would dictate what they're going to do. Now, I get it. They, when you lose two players that potentially were going to make $20 million, you got room to sign Huberdeau. So, if he's willing to sign, he's a very good player. I would sign him. But if he's not, and he's not willing to commit right now, I would sure trade him.
And he had an MVP-like season last year. People remember that. That's the thing. I mean, and when you look at the end of the day, like he had a really big season, and he also, they lost an MVP type season in Gaudreau. So they had two guys that were, MVPs in most years, but last year we had the incredible seasons from a lot of players. But Huberdeau and Gaudreau were both MVP worthy last year. Yeah, so getting back Huberdeau is a huge win for Calgary right now. I mean, because after you lose an MVP player, they got back an MVP player.
One more thing about Florida's cap. Remember, they're paying over $5 million to keep Yandel this year, and they're still way overpaying Bob too. Like this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, but I think
challenging.
Yeah, it is. It is challenging, and I agree. But I think they'll figure that out.
Now, I want to transition to, because Russ and I were talking about this before the show, how the silence is deafening on Nazem Kadri right now. And we heard some connection to Calgary, but there are rumors out there of an offer, and it hasn't happened. And I'm just wondering, is he still waiting to try to get back into Colorado, or what's going on? I mean, it's bizarre.
Kevin Kurtz had mentioned that there is definitely some mutual interest there between the Islanders and Kadri.
Yeah, I wrote about that this weekend a lot.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Doug.
No, yeah, I mean, I really think that is the case. And when silence is deafening, silence can often be led to Lou Lamoriello. so when I hear nothing,
you'll know by October if he's an Islander.
If you're managing to keep Kadri shut up, which you are,
that's
Kadri quiet right now. That might take the power of a Lou,
Yeah, but he hasn't offloaded anything.
Yeah, and just to explain how sometimes too it can become frustrating in this business is Eck has sources, I have sources, and on the day Eck said things he thought were moving closer, I talked to a guy who said, right now Kadri's going nowhere. He said I'm talking to one of the GMs that's in on him, and he said the problem is we all are interested in signing him, but we haven't been able to move the guys we need to move to create the cap space. And I think that goes for Lou Lamoriello. I think that goes for Colorado. Now Colorado doesn't have that, or excuse me, Calgary doesn't have that problem. But I think Kadri, I think, is willing to wait it out to see what he doesn't want to have to go to his only option. So I think he'd like to wait and see what people can do to get it done. But now we haven't even talked about what if Calgary could get Huberdeau and then sign Kadri. Now you can make a case they've actually done better.
Because now they've actually improved.
First round pick.
Turn into a different type of team and be better.
Yeah. They're going to be a better team. Like Huberdeau replaces Gaudreau, and Kadri replaces Tkachuk, and you've got a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. You got the defenseman. Like the other thing we didn't mention is Calgary was looking for a defenseman.
Right.
So now we've got Weegar that's filling that role. So they filled that role. They got a first-round pick. They got a player that's going to come in and help them be on the team at some point. And they could if they can get both of those players. So they could end up like a huge winner if that was possible. Wouldn't even want to speculate on how probable that is, but
that was hard to really tell. And my sources near the Islanders, Islanders sources are who knows type sources, because, and this is, I agree with you, Kev, like they were saying it was getting closer. They felt like there was, Kadri was just waiting on a trade to be made. I think I think that's definitely the case right now. That Kadri is waiting for a trade to be made from somebody. Somebody's going to make that trade. We're going to know pretty quickly if when we see Colorado move out somebody, or we see the Islanders move out somebody, we're going to have a pretty good idea where Kadri is going at that point for sure.
Well, I can't get inside the mind of Nazem Kadri, and frankly, I wouldn't want to. But he did turn down a trade to Calgary once before. He trade. So, I mean, if it's his last resort and that's the only team that's offering him 7 years at $8 million, then he may take it. But I do think that, yeah, he's waiting around for somebody to clear cap space, which is easier said than done. There are only a few teams that you can trade off stuff to, and you're probably going to be paying a premium to clear out like $5 or $6 million. Like, I mean, look at what Seattle gave up for a good forward in Oliver Bjorkstrand. They gave up 3 and a 4 for a guy who almost scored 30 goals this year.
Oh yeah, it's a steal. I mean, they had to do that.
They had to move him though, and you know that's when you know the cap has been stable for a while. When teams like Columbus have to make cap space, like it's also trying to get to the floor. It feels like.
Well, Anthony, tell like what Brian Hedger said yesterday on our show.
I mean, it was basically, for all intents and purposes, I mean, they did not, as Yarmo stated, they did not expect to have Johnny Gaudreau basically be available, and that created a chain reaction.
Yeah.
And ultimately, yes, if they knew maybe advanced that they were going to be in this, they might have moved off, a Nyquist or another player like that. But you probably in this circumstance would have had to tag on a pick in order to take those guys on, versus in this circumstance where they the path of, I guess you could say, least resistance is dealing Bjorkstrand, or maybe they look at Jake Voracek and moving him off as well. But again, pick has to be attached with the contracts that those guys have.
Right.
How many goals did he have last year?
Bjorkstrand, I think it was 28.
20, I was going to say 27.
Yeah.
I will say this: as much as I love that trade from Seattle, and I have a comment about Ron Francis, he has to be the least inspiring 27 goal scorer in the NHL this season, because they didn't just contact the Seattle Kraken as the only team they called. From what I heard,
right,
they called around the league, and that was their best offer.
That's astonishing.
Yeah. Like, they just didn't say, "Well, we owe Seattle a favor. We'll give."
I mean, he's a highly skilled guy, but again, he's a smaller guy, and I think
that's the issue. Now, I'm not taking anything away from. I love that trade from Seattle, but it's the point I was going to make about Ron Francis. Did this summer? I mean, first of all, now this was no doing. But he lucked out, and he was fortunate. And Shane Wright falls to him. Now he's got a future center package of Beniers and Shane Wright. That looks pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Okay. He didn't do well in the expansion draft. In fact, someone did a comparison with some of the worst expansion teams, and Seattle is right there. Like, they're a traditional expansion team in terms of that. But this summer, I think he had a great offseason. Like, he added a lot of players that I think can really help his team. I think he's acquitted himself by what he's done this summer. I just like it. I mean, it's not going to transform him into a playoff.
He's never been you go back to his Carolina days, though. He's never been sort of going for the big bombastic. He sometimes will make moves and he'll make moves in season, but in terms of building in the off season, he's
methodical,
low key and methodical in his approach. So it fits in with the way he operates.
It really is the case, though, that he could not have failed. I don't think this offseason, Kevin, having a bad offseason. I mean, he is one of the few teams with cap space out there, and there are so many players that are, like, we're talking about this guy. Like, this guy, in a normal season where cap space went up $3 million, whatever, they would have found a better trade for him.
They don't have cap space anymore after this deal. They only have $2 million in cap space.
No, but even that. I mean, but to this point, they had the cap space to make these kind of deals, and that there just aren't other teams that do. I mean, I heard Nashville was in on the Tkachuk thing too. I would just wonder how the heck that would have happened.
They actually were not.
They were not? Okay.
Yeah, David Boyle went on radio, and just because there were so many rumors, he goes, "I hate to break this to everyone, but we were not on Tkachuk's list." Okay. And we've had zero discussions, and it was everywhere on the internet that they were.
It really was.
Yeah.
I think after the Niederreiter signing, I think everybody was making assumptions about that, and that was a mistake.
And Kevin's right about Seattle being dreadful last year, but if you look at it now, okay, you've got Wright and Beniers, and maybe they don't put them 1-2 at center, but you got Wright and Beniers, two young centers, and what do you have surrounding them? You have Eberle and Schwartz and Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky. That's pretty good. And then your third line is Yanni Gourde, Jared McCann, and Alex Wenberg or Donskoy. They're now a really good team. I mean, I don't think they might.
Wright's making the team yet. You got to see how that takes out.
Yeah, we need to see that first. I think there's a chance Wright may not be on that roster.
Yeah.
Again, their center situation is we'll need to see. We'll need to see.
It was an odd team because they got their third line group together, but they didn't have a first two line.
First and second.
Right.
Because Yanni Gourde is I think
that's a Dave Hackstall trademark. He would rather have a couple of third lines.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
If we're done with this, I've got a subject that I think is interesting, and certainly will be to the Philadelphia members of this. Before we went on the air, the Red Wings signed Robert Haig. That went on, and what I find fascinating by that, and of course, if for those who are in Detroit, everybody knows this, but no one else is paying attention. That is the 11th defenseman that the Red Wings have put on the roster. 11th defenseman. Now that does count Simon Edvinsson, but almost everyone in Detroit and around the NHL thinks he's penciled in to play. So if you count him, that's 11. Right. They have 10 players with NHL experience right now on their defense. So nobody saw this Robert Haig signing coming because people were wondering how in the world they're going to sort that mess out. And these are all one-way contracts. So, with exception of obviously Simon Edvinsson. And now Wallman is in arbitration. But Yzerman actually likes Wallman when he got him from
Wallman can play.
St. Louis. He just said he watched him in college, likes his skating ability, his offensive ability. I'm sure he didn't like that Wallman took him to arbitration because that's not what Steve Yzerman likes. But and I don't know if I was Wallman, I would have done that either, considering he's got to fight with 9 other players for playing. But anyway, it's a fascinating thing. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like this. Does anyone ever remember? I mean, we're now
7, that's
5 weeks away from 6 weeks from training.
But in looking,
how do you solve
I can't remember that. No.
In looking at the roster of defensemen, I mean, based on what you said on the show in the past, maybe they tried to trade Roenick and that clears one body, but Jordan Osterley, Gustav Lindstrom, Mark Pysyk, Steven Kampfer, those are guys that could be put on waivers and maybe slip down to Grand Rapids. So
but I mean, I hate to say this to you because I know you understand this, is because I always send this out to readers. As much as we think that teams are more than willing to send $1 million players down to the minors, they really aren't. It's hard to go to your owner and say, I signed this guy for $1 million, but I'm sending him to the minors. So
that's the Toronto mindset with me, Kev, because the Leafs, they don't mind paying a guy $750,000 to storm down the AHL because they think that'll get them through waivers and then they'll need him later on. They don't mind paying that, but a team like Detroit and other teams do mind that.
Yeah, well, one thing they did with Kampfer is his minor league salary is $375,000 because they want to be able to bring him up and down. So I know what his role is going to be. He's there in case someone's going to be injured. I think he's certainly one of them. But they were talking about Pysyk playing, on that third pairing. They swear they're not giving up on Gus Lindstrom. He's not waivers exempt. He's got to go through waivers to go down.
Pysyk can play the wing too. He played the wing in Florida.
Oh yeah, but they don't have room on the wing either. They've got 14 forwards. So that he's 27. He's the 27th player. 27.
Something's going to give there.
27 players with NHL experience.
They have to.
Something's brewing here.
Something has to be brewing.
How do you, if you're Robert Hagg's agent, how do you sell this to Robert Hagg? You're going to sign him to Detroit as the
you got $850,000 you didn't have before.
Well, it is July. Here's the thing: it's July 25th. Things could happen by July 26th.
Right. You know why I think this is, and this is just a theory, is that what Yzerman has said publicly, and the one thing about Steve is he doesn't. Nothing leaks out, but he'll often tell you what he's thinking. If you go back to what he said after he fired Blashill and what his sentence, and I've brought this up and talked about it in Detroit here, he said, I've had the most success in my hires, not necessarily just in coaching, but in all my hires in hockey, I've had the greatest success when I've known the person in the past. And who did he hire? A guy that he knew in the past. He has said before about how, I don't feel comfortable if I'm not sure a guy, unless he's dominant at the AHL. He never brought Berggren up the whole season. He likes to see him dominate first a whole season, and then he brings him up. Like he kind of explains. And what he said about his signings is, I want this team to be much more difficult to play against than it was last year. And I think Haig
will absolutely fit the bill in that regard.
Right.
He's
that's
a
why I
really
think
scrappy defenseman.
Because the coach came in and he said the exact same thing. So if I'm Haig, I'm thinking, there's guys on that defense still that aren't playing that kind of hockey. I played that kind of hockey.
And he's going to make those guys on that defense maybe have to play that kind of hockey too. Like he's going to he's going to step into the practices and be hitting people, and other guys are going to realize, I don't start hitting people.
That's why I think he signed. I think he knows, like his agent said, I've been listening to what Eisenman said, and you're what they're looking for.
He can cover up for the defensive proclivities of some of those guys on the blue line. Like, I don't know if he would be paired with Roenick, but Roenick isn't exactly Rod Langway. So, you put a guy like Hag with him. I mean, it would cover up some of the problems that Roenick has playing 5-on-5. So, yeah, it's a good.
He was underappreciated in Philadelphia a lot. His ice time was not nearly what it should have been.
Again, and the thing what comes down to echoes the fact that in Philadelphia, where he was drafted second round, and the anticipation was that he would be more of a two-way. He definitely in his draft year had an offensive game. He had an NHL plus shot. It's just, I think that versus how the Flyers brought him along, which was. They had him focused a lot more on defense, and they wanted him to be more of a gritty defenseman because maybe they thought his offensive numbers in the SHL were not going to carry over.
No, Ak, I'll save my 1 year contract.
We'll do that another day.
We'll save that until tomorrow because it'll take up too much time. But the other one is Klingberg. That there's been nothing out there so far.
Yeah, I keep hearing that that he's gonna have to sign a 1-year deal somewhere, right? And then they keep saying he's not going to sign a 1-year deal somewhere. so that's when you talk to GMs versus when you talk to agents. It's like he's going to have to sign a 1-year deal to go somewhere.
I think if he really had a chance to go to Seattle, he should have done that. I don't know that was for sure, but there seemed to be some.
But that chance is gone now.
Yeah, right, exactly. That drumbeat is that he had a chance to go, and that wasn't. He thought he would look elsewhere. But I think it's similar to Kadri. I think there are teams interested, but there are teams that need to move players in order to make that accomplished. Yeah. Detroit has been linked. I don't know how that makes any sense. What I just told you. The only thing I would say. But now I'm starting to move off that. Every indication was that the Rebels were going to move Hronek, not because they didn't think he can play, but he seemed to sulk a little bit at the arrival of Seider, and he wasn't the same player. His role changed dramatically. Suddenly there was a much bigger horse, a much stronger horse in the stable, and he didn't know quite what to do with himself. But the word has been that they read him the riot act. They liked how he played in the World Championship. He seemed to understand that they still loved him, but he is going to have to just adjust to the fact that, hey, Seider is already better than you. He's bigger than you. He does everything better than you. But that doesn't mean we don't need you, because Hronek's a quality defenseman. He can put up points. He's not big, but he's not a bad one-on-one defender. He's not Brian Rafalski, but he's in that category where if you're coming down on him, he'll get his arms and legs in the way, and he can stop you. In the Czech Republic, it was interesting because people love Vrana in Detroit because he's dynamic and he's fun. The Czech media, they were on him at the World Championship, but they loved Hronek because in Detroit, the fans were kind of down on Hronek. It was the other way around. So it's interesting that scene. So anyway, I heard through the grapevine that Steve Yzerman gave a speech at a big Little Caesars rally where there were thousands of people, and he talked about his young stable of players, and Hronek was mentioned in that group. So
there you go.
maybe the tide has changed, and Hronek is back in good graces. And there's reason for that. As I said, he can play.
Yeah.
He's a good player, but he was not a good player last year. So it'd be interesting. But I bring that all up because the only way I can see Klingberg working is, nobody knows Hronek better than Jim Nill. They need a right shot defenseman.
Right.
You go to Nill and you say, we'll trade you Hronek, and then you'll sign Klingberg, and then we'll trade for that and something like that.
Along those lines, yeah.
But in both these situations, in the Kadri situation and now the Klingberg situation, we hear, okay, a team needs to trade a player to clear space to sign the player. I'm looking at Cap Friendly right now. There are 8 teams, only 8, that are over $10 million in available cap space, and only 2 over $20 million, and that's Arizona and Anaheim, and we know that they'll barely get over the cap floor. So there's not a lot of space out there. That's the thing. That's the problem.
No.
Well, there's hardly any.
There's hardly any. That is the problem. So
yeah, it really is a huge issue. I wanted to end the show with something kind of fun. So there's a guy. I don't know if you guys saw the Flying Fluffy Hockey guy. Did you see this guy? So anyway, Flying Fluffy Hockey on YouTube is a Florida Panthers vlogger, I guess, but for lack of a better word, he puts video blogs out. And last Thursday, the day before this trade went down, I want to show you his brief entry here. I'm going to play it for you. This is really, really something else. This is the day before. Remember this. This is the day before this trade. But really no one saw coming.
This is the Florida Steve Dangle, is what this is.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, he only is. He's not he's not a huge YouTube following, but he's got a following. So let me make sure we can all hear.
You got a co-host at least, though.
Yeah. Here we go. So here we go. Ready?
I got a migraine. I'm highly medicated. It's the only reason I'm functional. I get on Twitter, use up my eyes have about an hour in them each day right now. I used up 20 minutes of my eye strength reading about how the Panthers Twitter and everybody going crazy about Matthew Tkachuk and what we might be willing to give up. If no Anton Lundell, I'm not even. This is not even up for negotiation.
Right.
It's just not. First of all, Huberdeau has 1 year left on this contract. He's getting a little long in the tooth. And besides, who cares anyway, right? Huh? Who cares? Right, Johnny? So, for those of you who don't understand why I said who cares, somebody will let you know in the comments. If you don't know, you don't know.
We're getting there. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Anton Lundell, I've been saying it. I know you're medicated, but still, seriously, why?
I gotta find the right spot.
You didn't even put on a jersey. Somebody's got to go that was fixing to get a lot of money. That's the other thing. You could give up Lundell and 5 first-round picks, but we still got to have space to give him the money, to give Tkachuk the money. So that's still, what are you going to do? Give him Weegar and Hornquist and Lundell and a ton of ones? Are you kidding me? You give him one of those 2 schmucks at the top who haven't done anything for us other than look great in the regular season. That's what you do.
So he predicted the trade.
$10 million guys. But you only could have so many guys. Okay? You can only have so many guys. And there's no math there really going anywhere. We can get along.
Hold on.
The first time he was full of play. All right? That said, no Anton Lundell. Just you called up Calgary and said, hey, Huberdeau, Weegar, and give him any other prospect in a first. Not Lundell, but Huberdeau, Weegar, a first, any other prospect. If Calgary said yes, I pulled the trigger because I'd rather have 8 more years of Tkachuk than 8 more years of Huberdeau. Because the age difference, just the age difference alone,
This video is proof that
No,
even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Well, no, but I will point this out, and it goes to what I said before. The fans and the Panthers, obviously he watches the games, and the Panther fans knew that Mackenzie Weegar was on his way out. He was the guy that was going to be moved to solve the problems because this was not just a playoff thing. This was a regular season. So that's why I don't think that the fan base is sweating the loss of Mackenzie Weegar.
Yeah. I mean, he called the exact trade, guys. I mean, he said you were going to Weegar first round pick and a prospect. That's pretty.
Kev, you're right. There were rumors when Anthony and I were in Montreal for the draft of Weegar going to Ottawa.
Yeah.
So he was on the block. I still struggle. Why? Because now looking in retrospect at their defense after this trade, yes, it's easy to go out and find a couple defensemen, but they don't have any cap space to do it. So I don't know how they're going to pull that off. But
they're tapped. I mean, at the end of the day, I think they're going to be tapping into their system in this case to find a replacement.
Well, but somebody always gets hurt. You end up with some cap space.
Or Stevie Weil send him somebody.
Yeah, he's got
Maybe hit the logjam.
And Zito and Yzerman actually know each other, so I mean they'll figure it out. But I don't want to soft sell this. I mean, this is their Achilles heel. I mean, it wasn't good enough last year. I think what they're counting on. I'd love to ask Bill Zito this is I think they think Maurice will make the defense better. And which I think probably is the reason why we have a new coach.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case.
The defense never got better, and usually new coaches make the defense better because you can't turn 20 goal scorers into 40 goal scorers, but you can always make a team better.
Tighten things up defensively.
Yeah. I
mean, and again, we always forget that we look at the blue line, and in reality, team defense is everybody.
Right.
Yeah. Very good, guys. Very good. Good show, everyone. Thanks all for watching out there. We'll be back again tomorrow with more stuff for you. Who knows? We might see a signing any point today. I mean, you got to feel at some point these guys are going to get signed. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.